Keep your voice down. They'll hear you. It was 2:17 a.m. inside FCI Dublin, the federal women's prison in Northern California that many inmates called the Rape Club. From the corner of her bunk, an inmate pressed a small black recorder hidden inside a pen casing against her blanket. On the other side of the cell door, a guard's footsteps echoed down the hall. She had been documenting everything, every threat, every sound, every late-night knock on cell doors that shouldn't have happened. What began as a desperate act of survival was slowly turning into evidence, real, dangerous evidence. The recordings revealed conversations no one was supposed to hear, guards joking about who's next, supervisors warning others to keep it quiet, and even a senior officer describing what he called favors for protection. The woman didn't know it yet, but those recordings would one day make their way into FBI hands, labeled confidential, in a file that would expose years of sexual abuse and systemic corruption inside a U.S. federal prison. But that night, she was still alone, terrified, and unsure if she'd live long enough to see justice. When a guard passed her cell, she hid the recorder under her mattress and pretended to sleep. The next morning, she mailed a letter to her lawyer, carefully coded so prison staff wouldn't understand. Inside the envelope, she slipped a micro SD card. It held the first piece of proof that the walls of FCI Dublin weren't protecting anyone. The scandal didn't explode overnight. For years, whispers spread among inmates, stories of assaults, cover-ups, and staff retaliation. Most were ignored or silenced, but the recordings changed everything. They didn't just tell stories, they proved them. Within months, the Department of Justice Inspector General received anonymous tips. Then, the FBI got involved. Agents began interviewing inmates one by one, secretly cross-checking statements with the recordings. What they found matched nearly word for word. Still, inside the prison, no one knew who was feeding information to the outside. Guards were furious, inmates were terrified, and rumors of a rat spread like wildfire. The woman with the recorder was called into the warden's office twice in a week. Both times, she stayed silent. She knew they suspected her. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the razor wire fence, she found a message scratched into her bunk. "They know what you're doing." Her hands trembled. She looked around the cell block. Faces turned away, no one would make eye contact. That night, she didn't sleep at all. By morning, word spread that an FBI vehicle had entered the prison grounds. The same officers who mocked the women now looked uneasy. Something was coming, and it started with a single recording no one was supposed to have. But before the truth could surface, someone inside decided she wouldn't speak again. The next morning, the prison was quiet, too quiet. The woman who had risked everything to record the guards didn't show up for roll call. Her bunk was made, her locker untouched. To the staff, it was routine. To the inmates, it was a warning. Rumors spread through the cell blocks before breakfast was even over. Some said she'd been transferred. Others whispered that she was taken to solitary for investigation. But those who knew her best said something else entirely. She never left that building alive. Inside FCI Dublin, disappearances didn't always mean someone was gone. Sometimes they just stopped being mentioned. That same day, a new officer arrived on duty, wearing a blank expression and a badge that looked barely used. He walked the corridors like he already knew the layout. But there was something odd. He avoided eye contact with the other guards and never joined their jokes. That man wasn't part of the usual staff. Weeks later, inmates would learn he was an FBI agent working undercover. The Bureau had finally infiltrated Dublin. He began asking questions about specific guards, names that had appeared in the recordings. Quietly, he collected stories, compared patterns, and noted the same detail again and again. The victims always shared similar words: threats, fear, nighttime. Each phrase aligned perfectly with what the missing inmate had whispered into her recorder months earlier. The FBI's secret operation inside FCI Dublin started uncovering the network of abuse and silence. Inmates revealed how officers traded favors for control, and how the warden, Ray J. Garcia, would walk through the halls with a camera ordering women to pose inappropriately while calling it inspections. He'd later be convicted of sexual abuse and misconduct, a federal warden sentenced for crimes inside the very place he was sworn to protect. But when the undercover agent tried to retrieve the whistleblower's belongings from her cell, something was missing. The recorder, the SD cards, gone. Prison officials claimed they had been confiscated during a routine search, yet not a single piece of evidence appeared in official records. The agent suspected a cover-up, but proving it was another story. Each time he pushed for internal access, his superiors faced resistance from the Bureau of Prisons. Files were redacted, logs disappeared, and one internal memo even warned, "Do not pursue further without DOJ clearance." Meanwhile, outside the walls, reporters began receiving anonymous packages, letters, and partial transcripts from the missing inmates' recordings. Some pages described incidents involving named officers, others included time-stamped entries written in shaky handwriting. The story was breaking beyond the prison gates, and once again, the FBI's confidential trail pointed back to one woman who vanished after speaking up. Inside the prison, tension reached a breaking point. Inmates staged small acts of defiance, refusing work shifts, chanting through vents after lights out. One wrote in her journal, "They took her, but her voice is still here." Then one night, a power outage hit the facility. Cameras went dark for 11 minutes. When the lights came back on, the undercover agent found a folded piece of paper shoved under his office door. It read, "If you want the rest of the recordings, check the laundry room vent." He stood there frozen, realizing whoever left it had risked everything. The next morning, the vent was opened. Inside was a small pen casing, the same kind she had used to hide her recorder. The files were still intact, labeled by date. The last one was titled, "Garcia, Office, 10:42 p.m." What was inside that final recording would shake the entire federal system. Garcia, Office, 10:42 p.m. The timestamp matched the night the whistleblower vanished. The audio began with static, faint voices, then footsteps. A door creaked open, and a man's voice came through, calm but cold. "You think anyone's gonna believe you?" Then silence. Seconds later, the woman's trembling voice. "I have proof. It's not just you." Another pause. Then the sound. A thud, a struggle, metal hitting the floor. The tape cut out abruptly. The agent froze. He played it again, then a third time slower. The voice belonged to Warden Ray J. Garcia, confirmed by earlier FBI interviews. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was direct evidence of intimidation, violence, and possible murder inside a federal facility. That night, the agent uploaded the file to the Bureau's secure system. Within hours, a task force was authorized. By dawn, FBI vehicles surrounded FCI Dublin. Armed agents entered the prison, ordering all staff into the cafeteria for questioning. Several officers were handcuffed on the spot. News of the raid spread fast, first to local outlets, then national. Headlines flashed. FBI raid FCI Dublin. Sexual abuse and cover-up scandal exposed. Inside the prison, the women stood at their cell doors, watching through narrow glass windows as agents marched the same guards who once held power over them down the halls in cuffs. In total, 5 staff members, including Garcia, were indicted on federal charges of sexual abuse, obstruction of justice, and falsifying records. The missing inmate's name was never released to the public, but her recordings were cited directly in court filings. Her voice, once ignored, had become the evidence that brought the system to its knees.
Months later, the Department of Justice released a report describing a toxic culture of abuse and denial. Inspectors called FCI Dublin beyond rehabilitation. The prison was eventually shut down in 2024, with remaining inmates transferred across the country. But for the women who lived through it, closure never came easy. Many believe the whistleblower's death had been covered up to protect reputations, not just within the Bureau of Prisons, but higher up. Some said her body was moved before investigators arrived. Others said she was buried quietly under another name. What remained certain were her recordings, evidence that could never be erased. In one of the recovered files, the only one that hadn't been sent to the FBI, the woman's voice was calm, almost resigned. "If you're hearing this," she said, "it means I didn't make it. But maybe now, someone will believe us." Her words became the closing sound of the official FCI Dublin investigation video, a haunting echo of courage inside one of America's darkest prisons. As the case faded from headlines, one question lingered among those who heard her voice. How many more prisons hold stories that were never recorded? The story of FCI Dublin wasn't just about one inmate. It was about a system built to silence and a single voice brave enough to break it.